There is a version of you that no one knows, not because you actively hide it, but because it only appears when there are no witnesses, when there is no judgment, when there are no social consequences at all. And it is exactly this version that this test will expose. You have 10 seconds before you begin. Use them to decide whether you truly want to know what you're about to discover about yourself. Level 1. You are in an empty parking lot. When you open your car door, you lightly hit the vehicle next to you and leave a visible scratch. There are no cameras, no people around, no one saw it. What do? Don't answer what you should do. Answer what your body already decided before you even finished reading this sentence. If your first reaction was to look for a piece of paper to leave a note, your system of social regulation is active even in the absence of an audience. You don't act out of fear of consequences. You act because you've internalized an identity that needs to remain consistent, even when no one is watching. But if your first thought was to look around to confirm there were no witnesses and only then consider what to do, the order reveals everything. You didn't consult your character, you consulted the risk. Level 2. Now the scenario scales up. You accidentally discover that the company you work for committed a serious financial irregularity. Nothing illegal that directly implicates you, but something that, if reported, would cause real harm to people you don't know and will probably never meet. Reporting it has a cost: exposure, discomfort, possible indirect retaliation. Staying silent has no cost. Absolutely no one will know that you knew. What do? Here the test isn't in the choice itself, it's in how quickly you arrived at it. If the answer came immediately and clearly, you operate based on values that don't depend on an audience. If you had to calculate, weigh, build a justification for whichever direction you chose, then your morality is situational. It exists when it's convenient and disappears when the cost appears. Also, notice what happened while you were thinking. Did you consider what people close to you would think if they knew your decision? Did you imagine how you would feel telling someone about it? If so, you didn't make the decision alone. You brought an imaginary audience into the process. And that means that even in the absence of real witnesses, you still need an internal audience to function. Most people live in this second group and never admit it, not even to themselves. Level 3. Now I'm going to remove any possibility of rationalization. Imagine there is a technology capable of recording every thought you've had in the last 24 hours. Not your actions, not your words, your thoughts. The silent judgments about people around you, the fantasies you would never verbalize. The moments when you desired something that completely contradicts the image you project of yourself. This record will be shown to the 3 people whose opinions matter most to you. How do you feel right now? There's no option here, only what you're feeling in this exact moment. And if what you're feeling is panic, it's because there is a real gap between who you are when no one is watching and who you intend to be when everyone is. This gap isn't moral weakness, it's the exact measure of how much your identity depends on an audience to exist. That's far more revealing than anything you've ever said about yourself out loud. Notice what you tried to do while imagining the scenario. Most people start mentally editing before I even finish describing the situation. They begin selecting which thoughts would be shown, as if it were possible to negotiate with a thought experiment. That automatic editing is your image management system operating in real time, even in a fictional situation where there's no one to impress. That says a lot about how much you live in a constant performance mode, even when you believe you're being authentic. Behavioral psychology calls what you just felt the private integrity gap. It's the space between the public self, the version calibrated for social consumption, and the private self, the version that operates without filters when the audience leaves. Research in moral neuroscience shows that this gap exists in virtually all human beings. The question is never whether it exists. The question is how big it is. Individuals with a small gap are those whose behavior changes minimally in the absence of witnesses. They are not necessarily better people. They are more integrated. What they think, what they say, and what they do form a coherent system that doesn't depend on an audience to hold together. They don't need to remember which version they presented to which person, because there is only one version. Individuals with a large gap live in constant management. Every social context requires a different calibration. Every relationship gets an edited version. Over time, this maintenance effort consumes energy that should be going elsewhere. And the person begins to feel a deep fatigue they can't name because they've never admitted the cause. An exhaustion that doesn't come from what they do, but from what they sustain. What the empty parking lot reveals isn't whether you are honest or dishonest. It reveals whether your moral compass needs an audience to function. And most people, when taking this test in silence, discover they need it more than they'd like to admit. Because the audience isn't just external. Over time, it becomes internal. You begin to monitor yourself even when you're alone, anticipating the judgment of people who aren't even present. You act one way at home, another at work, another with family, another with strangers. And at some point, you stop knowing which of these versions is actually you. There's a term for this in social psychology: identity fragmentation. It's not a disorder. It's the natural result of years spent managing different versions of yourself for different audiences, without ever stopping to ask which one is genuine. Fragmentation doesn't hurt sharply. It produces a constant feeling that something is slightly out of place, without you being able to name what, a background restlessness you attribute to work, to relationships, to your stage of life. Rarely to what it really is, the cost of never having been whole in front of anyone. Now look at the people around you through this lens. The colleague who is impeccable in meetings but acts differently when the boss isn't around. The friend who defends values in public and ignores them in private. The partner who says one thing and does another when they think you're not paying attention. You've probably identified someone, maybe more than one, and likely felt, for a moment, a sense of superiority for having noticed. But that feeling is exactly the mechanism you should be examining, because identifying the gap in others is much easier than looking at your own. It's an automatic defense reflex. While you analyze others, you don't have to analyze yourself. But there's a piece of information this exercise carries that's much harder to process. The people around you are doing the exact same exercise. They also observe the difference between what you say and what you do when you think they're not watching. They also have a theory about who you really are behind the version you present. And their theory is probably closer to the truth than you would be comfortable admitting. The question that remains isn't what you do when no one is watching. It's what you would do if you discovered that someone always was. Have you learned something new today? Do you know yourself better after watching this video? If so, please leave a like. This will help share the video with more people who might need this kind of knowledge today. If you feel this content will continue to help you in the future, consider subscribing to receive more insights about the human mind.